Hello everybody, my name is Christian and welcome back to PlayStation Source. So we're days away at this point. Maybe not days away, but we're pretty close to E3 2018. And in the spirit of E3 2018, we here at PlayStation Source are getting hyped up, getting ready for dreams to come true. And because of that, we thought it would be worth it to revisit a rumor that happened a while back, had a bit of a presence again in the underground rumblings of the internet recently, and that is the PlayStation 1 Classic Edition. So today on PlayStation Source, I thought it would be fun to go through 10 games that I think should be on the PlayStation 1 Classic if it ever became a thing. Obviously, this is just for fun. There's no credence to any of these games. These are just some picks I think would probably be very likely to make it on there, get a wide representation of their franchises that were prominent on that system, as well as some diversity in their lineup. So starting off the list at number 10 is Crash Team Racing. Now, what I just said, diversity in the lineup, is the exact reason that Crash Team Racing is here, along with the fact that Crash Team Racing is the best non-Mario Kart franchise racing kart game. It's so good. Crash Team Racing is amazing. I'm so surprised that that generation, Crash Team Racing beat Mario Kart, at least in my eyes, for the most fun title. N64 Mario Kart, not that great. Crash Team Racing, really fun. Also, way more likely than any of the Gran Turismo games, because Gran Turismo, their entire being is because they want to showcase the hardware. I guess it would be cool to put a Gran Turismo on the Classic Edition and say, this is where we were at the time and we thought this was cutting edge. But Crash Team Racing is more fun, so it's making my list. Next up at number 9 is Tekken 3. It wouldn't be a PlayStation 1 Classic without a Tekken game, and it wouldn't be a Classic Edition without a fighting game. And Tekken 3 is the best of both of those options. Tekken 3, from all my research, is the best Tekken fighting game on the PlayStation 1 console. Tekken, if you're not familiar with it, is Heihachi, you know, the guy with the crazy hair? Yeah, it's him. This is his game. Tekken is a 3D fighting arena game made by Bandai Namco. It's a different way to move around in a fighting space. I don't know much about Tekken 3 because my experience with fighting games has always just been Smash Bros. And Dragon Ball Z games. But Tekken 3, I've played the most recent Tekken. I dig it. I talk to people. Tekken 3 is their favorite on PS1. So Tekken 3 gets a spot on this list because it is a fighting game, and we obviously need that in a plug-and-play console. Next up is a bit of a fan-favorite cult classic from what we now know as Square Enix, Brave Fencer Musashi. Brave Fencer Musashi is an adventure RPG in the style of a Zelda game, where you play as Musashi, a warrior. He's a kid, kind of, and he's pulled through time. He's brought into medieval times by a sorcerer and a princess because they need the legendary warrior Musashi to save the world from an incoming threat. It's a really charming game. It's pretty funny, and it plays, like I said, like a Zelda game. So obviously, if we want to have a diverse lineup on this PlayStation 1 Classic, we need a fun adventure game that has actually really deep systems and a lot of charm behind it, and Brave Fencer Musashi is just that. Next up, we got a little bit of a double hitter, but I'm including both because they're important, and that is Resident Evil and Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 1 might be one of the most iconic PlayStation 1 games of all time. The FMV cutscene at the beginning, the zombie turning around and facing the camera, the doors, the tapes, everything about Resident Evil 1 screams nostalgia and 90s, and it's a fantastic game. Although I think Resident Evil Remake is the best edition of that game. Resident Evil 2 is yet to come into our lives as the remake promised so many years ago at this point. We still haven't seen anything from it, but Resident Evil 2 refined everything that the first game did so well. Resident Evil 2 gave us the introduction of Leon Kennedy, one of the most iconic characters in a Resident Evil game. It gave us multiple paths through the story. It gave us our first in-depth look at Raccoon City, and gave us so many memorable icons and moments from that series, and evolved what Resident Evil the original did so well. So it absolutely deserves a spot on this list. Next up at number 6 is a very weird game you've probably never seen before, and that is Pandemonium. Pandemonium was published by Crystal Dynamics and developed by Toys for Bob. But Pandemonium is a side-scrolling 2D/3D action platformer that was very innovative and very impressive for the time of release in 1996. In Pandemonium, you play as either a Joker, Jester guy, or a sorceress. Each character has their own special moves. The jester gets a cartwheel to hit their enemies, and the sorceress gets a double jump, each having their own unique ways to explore levels, having secrets that only some can reach. Pandemonium is an underrated game. It is forgotten from the PlayStation 1 generation. That's basically the whole purpose about what these classic editions are for. Give a spotlight on things that maybe didn't get the right amount of attention they should have back in the day. Number 5, we got Symphony of the Night, the best Castlevania game that I've ever played and the only Castlevania game I've ever played. Symphony of the Night was hugely innovative for its time. It's a beautiful game, really dense, gorgeous pixel art throughout the entire thing. The map is designed masterfully because, spoiler alert, if you plan on playing Symphony of the Night, once you beat the game, you don't really beat the game, the castle inverts, and the entire time you're going through that game up to the first half before the inverted castle. If you look up, the game is designed so when the castle inverts, nothing is changed. The roof and ceiling of the castle is now the floor, and it works. It's an incredible moment in that game, and one of the best Metroidvania games that inspired every single version of that genre we've gotten to this day, including things like Shovel Knight and the upcoming spiritual successor, Bloodstained. Next up at number 4, we have my personal favorite mascot of the PlayStation 1, the Spyro the Dragon Trilogy. This is one of those cases, like with the NES Classic, that you're gonna get your Mario 2, your Mario 3. Alright? This and another game, which we'll get to, will absolutely have each game in this series. Spyro the Dragon Trilogy is one of my favorite gaming trilogies I've ever played. Each game learns so much from the one previous. It doesn't change up the gameplay too much, so it's a natural progression. You feel like that world has a life to it because it doesn't mess with its physics that it sets up in the first game that much. It just improves story-wise, cutscenes, everything about that game series gets better as it goes on. We're gonna get to revisit it this fall thanks to Toys for Bob. Number 3 is one of the best games of all time, no question, no debate. There is no way you can argue this. Metal Gear Solid. From the mastermind Hideo Kojima, as a follow-up to the Metal Gear series, we got Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation 1. The adventure of Solid Snake infiltrating Shadow Moses Island in the most cinematic experience any gamer has ever had up to that point in time. It was hugely innovative for that time, in an age where people were questioning if video games were more than Mario, more than Sonic, more than just cartoony or arcadey games. Metal Gear Solid delivered and said, no, games can be even more impactful, more emotional, and more cinematic than anything else we've ever seen. Metal Gear Solid is a classic. If you clicked on this video, you should have known that this was going to be on the list and up towards the top. The top 3 are really the most influential and important PS1 games in my opinion, and Metal Gear Solid is absolutely one of the most important games released on the PlayStation 1. It paved the way for games like Uncharted, Gears of War. Any cinematic experience we get today is in thanks to Metal Gear Solid for proving that we can do that in this medium. So next up is even more obvious than Metal Gear Solid if you're a PlayStation fan, and that is the Crash Bandicoot Trilogy. Crash Bandicoot Trilogy, what can I say? Exactly like Spyro, it just gets better with each one. Although 2 is my favorite, I think they went a little too far with the vehicles in Crash Warped. The Crash Trilogy is so integral to the PlayStation 1 and the nostalgia of the PlayStation 1. A PlayStation 1 Classic would need Crash Bandicoot on that box. He is so important to that console and its memory to modern day. Even though we just got the Crash Bandicoot Trilogy, we're getting the Spyro Trilogy in the fall. So if a PlayStation 1 Classic came out, we would obviously get these two mascots because they are the PlayStation 1, at least in most people my age's eyes. Crash Bandicoot and Spyro embody what the PlayStation 1 is. And for that reason, he obviously gets each of his games on the PlayStation 1 Classic Edition, because who am I if I didn't put that on there? I'd be a hack. So coming in at number 1 is in the same pantheon as Metal Gear Solid. It opened up gaming and an entire section of gamers in the world to a brand new genre that they really didn't have that much experience with in the past. This game is responsible for JRPGs becoming so influential and so successful in the West, even to this day, and that is Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII is one of the most important games of all time. Are you sensing a trend with the PlayStation 1 games on this list? The Final Fantasy VII was many people's first Final Fantasy game. It's easily the one with the most iconic characters: Cloud Strife, Sephiroth, Tifa, Yuffie, Aerith, Barrett, Cait Sith. It's not up for debate that Final Fantasy VII is the image you think of when you think of Final Fantasy. If you're a casual person who's not into Final Fantasy, that's the people you think of. The hardcore obviously prefer their different versions and different games. I personally like 9 and I like 15 a lot, but 7 is the Final Fantasy game on PlayStation 1. Even though Final Fantasy 8 and Final Fantasy 9 did so much more, even Final Fantasy Tactics, visually with the series on the PlayStation 1, Final Fantasy VII is in the upper echelon. It's one of the greats of all time. So many people were introduced to Final Fantasy and JRPGs in general because of how massive this game was in the West when it's released on the PlayStation 1. It was a door being opened to the world for one of my favorite genres, and because of that, Final Fantasy VII, one of the most iconic PlayStation 1 games of all time, one of the most iconic video game covers, video game characters, video game music of all time, absolutely deserves a spot on the PlayStation 1 Classic. I think it's probably the most likely of any single other game on this list, just because if they can put that out, maybe they'll be able to delay Final Fantasy VII Remake again because we have another way to play it. So that is the end of my list for the games that absolutely deserve to be on a hypothetical PlayStation 1 Classic. But I want to hear from you guys. Comment down below, do you think we could get this announcement at E3? Do you think that any of these games wouldn't get on there because of licensing issues or partnerships? And what else would you expect from a PlayStation 1 Classic? Ideally, I would say at least 20 games. There's obviously some other picks I left off of this list. There's the other 3D platformers. Maybe they throw a Gex game on here or something. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a like and share it around so we can build the hype for E3 2018 together. Keep it locked here on PlayStation Source over the next week or two as we get closer and closer to E3 and the PlayStation press conference. I cannot wait. It's my favorite time of the year. So, as always, greatness awaits, and I'll see you all in the next video.